Hello guys, welcome to Knowledge Pond YouTube channel. This is the last final session of MVC 6 video series. In this video, like in this session, I would like to cover how to install ASP.NET 5 on both Windows and non-Windows platforms like Linux and Mac OS. And I'll also share what exactly the DNX and .NET execution environment and the development tools for designing and developing ASP.NET 5 and MVC 6 application and unit testing and XUnit.NET and integration testings, how we can publish and deploy our ASP.NET web apps, and a roadmap and the current version of ASP.NET 5. So let me start with how to install ASP.NET 5. So as we all know that ASP.NET 5 is supporting for cross-platform apart from Windows. It also support for OS X like OS X and Linux. And to support for multiple operating systems, the major component we all require is DNX, .NET execution environment for developing and running our .NET application. So we can install ASP.NET 5 in two ways, either by manually by using command line tools or graphical tools like Visual Studio. Installing ASP.NET 5 application, ASP.NET 5 runtime on Windows. So to install ASP.NET 5 on Windows environment, it is a three-step procedure. First, we need to install the DNX.NET execution environment, and then install the version manager. The version manager is used to install one or more versions of the DNX and manage the current version make is available. And the last step for installing ASP.NET 5 in Windows is we need to install the .NET development utility, that is the DNU. So this DNU does like it adds required packages from the Nugget, and it also used to build packaging and publishing our DNX projects. So that means that there are the major three components are required to develop any ASP.NET web application on Windows environment: the DNX, DNVM, and DNU. If you would like to support for Mac OS, there is a different procedure for installing ASP.NET 5 on Mac OS. So the easiest way to get started building the application with ASP.NET 5 is install the latest version of Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is an open source development environment for non-Windows based operating systems. So install the ASP.NET 5 with Visual Studio Code. You need to install the Mono, and you need to install the Visual Studio Code, and you need to install the ASP.NET 5 for Mac OS X. And there is another way also we can install ASP.NET 5 from the command line. Install that from the command line. You need to install the DNVM and DNX. So how to install the ASP.NET 5 on Linux operating system? To install the ASP.NET 5 on Linux OS, you need to install the .NET version manager that we call as the DNVM and .NET execution environment. So what exactly the DNX, the .NET environment runtime environment? So DNX is a development kit for runtime environment that has everything which we require to build or run our .NET application on any kind of supported operating system like Windows or Mac and Linux. As I told you in the previous slides, the main prerequisite for developing, designing our .NET web applications is the DNX. It provides the consistent development and execution environment across multiple platforms and across different .NET flavors. That means because of this DNX only we can make a consistency uh, on any kind of supported platform. With DNX, we can develop our application on one platform and run it on different platform as long as we have one compatibility DNX installed on that platform. Suppose if you develop a web application on Windows, so that can run on very much similar and a consistency manner on Linux or OS X or Mac OS in the similar fashion due to this DNX. Even if you develop an app for .NET Core and Mono, and it supports if you want like to build from .NET 4.6, so it supports due to this DNX, it supports, it makes consistency across the platform, across the frameworks. So it dramatically simplifies the work we need to develop cross-platform applications. And when we use like cloud optimized .NET Core framework, it takes care of hosting the CLR, handling the dependencies, and bootstrapping our application. And we can easily define our project solutions using lightweight JSON format and build our projects and publish them for distribution as well. This where exactly the DNX sits on a .NET architecture, ASP.NET architecture. If you see here on the top of that .NET Core, there is a .NET execution environment, and on top of that we have ASP.NET 5 and MVC 6. So the major part over here, selecting the right DNX, is the major and very important things we all need to keep in the mind. Now ASP.NET runs on .NET execution environment that we already known that, but we have three DNX to choose to develop our application. The one is the .NET main framework, that is the CLR, and the second one is the .NET Core, as I given complete information about all three frameworks in the first video. .NET Core is a modular runtime and library implementation that includes subset of this is been extracted and made as a tiny small framework for supporting for multiple operating system. The .NET Core consists set of libraries. These libraries we call as a Core FX, and the runtime we call as a Core CLR. And moreover, this .NET Core is a open source and are available and distributed via Nugget. The Mono is a part of .NET framework built primarily for non-Windows platform. It is moreover is open source and supports for cross-platform since quite a long time when the .NET released in 2002 onwards something. So what are the development tools are available for designing and developing, build and deploy our web applications? So as we all know that Visual Studio 2015 is our favorite tool, the full-fledged integrated development studio for designing a modern web-based application for deploying till deployment. Like the complete, it supports Visual Studio 2015 support complete project life cycle from starting design to till publishing. And apart from this favorite Visual Studio 2015, Microsoft also shipped another two supported environment tools for designing, developing ASP.NET web apps. The one is Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a redefined and optimized source code editor for building and debugging modern web cloud-based applications on Linux and OS X and Windows. In Windows, as usually, we can use Visual Studio 2015. If you would like to design and develop a web application for Linux and OS X OSs, the best choice, the right tool for is the Visual Studio Code. The last development tool is the command line, where the command prompt where we can design developing a .NET web application, using our favorite text editor. So now it's possible to develop a cross-platform application using the text editor and command line like either CMD and PowerShell on Windows without even opening Visual Studio. So the developing .NET web application, as I told you, there are three main components are required. If you have three components on your system, so you can develop complete web application using command line as well. The three major components are DNX and DNVM and DNU. So unit testing, how we can provide a unit testing for MVC application. So one way we can say goodbye to Visual Studio unit testing framework, and moreover the unit testing for any test-driven development applications are common in recent years for any kind of application. Even MVC there is no exception in that case as well. In MVC our application logics, most of the logics resides inside our controller, which makes us great advantage for unit testing as well as testing all the cases. The keeping this in the mind, ASP.NET 5 has been redesigned from Microsoft with the testability for creating unit testing for our application. Very easy than compared to older versions of ASP.NET. And ASP.NET 5 uses right now the XUnit.NET as a unit test framework for unit testing support. So XUnit.net is a free and open source community focused unit testing tool for the .NET applications. It is written by the original inventor like of NUnit 2, and it is the latest technology for unit testing for C# language, F# VB.NET, any other .NET supported language. So XUnit is a full compatibility with ASP.NET 5 MVC6 for which are running targeted for core CLR. So that means we can easily use XUnit for our MVC6 projects to start adding the unit test cases. The unit test cases is very similar. Fact there we can write test cases to test our model and controller. So there is a bit difference between unit testing and integration testing. Integration tests verify that different parts of an application that works correctly work together. Unlike unit testing, integration test frequently involves in the application infrastructure and like databases and file system, network resources, and web requests and responses. So that means unit testing we can do with some mock objects, but integration test we really require the actual objects or actual resource to test. So how we can publish and deploy our .NET web applications. ASP.NET is designed to decouple the web server web application from the underlying web server that hosts them. In my previous video, I clearly explained how the web server and ASP.NET runtime is decoupled by including like introducing new web interface like OWIN architecture. So from using OWIN, they completely decoupled web server from the ASP.NET runtime. And traditional ASP.NET applications have been only supporting for Windows only, and there is directly we are hosting into IIS environment. But right now in ASP.NET 5 supports for IIS, IIS Express, and Web Listener and Kestrel Web Server for supporting different kind of platforms. IIS still is a recommended way to host our application if your application is targeting for the Windows. And apart from this ASP.NET 5 ships, there are three different servers like IIS, WebCastrol, and Web Listener. If you would like to publish and the deployment of ASP.NET applications for any kind of apart from Windows Windows IIS, if you would like to publish deployment for different platforms, now the option is available. Microsoft is supporting in different ways. If you would like to publish and deploy for the IIS, there are directly as usual we have two options right now: publishing directly from the Visual Studio, or we can use Xcopy option to IIS server. And publishing to Windows virtual machine on Azure, publishing to Azure web app with the continuous deployment, publish to Docker image for any non-Windows supported OS, and even we can create our own publishing environment as well. There is a lot of flexibility for publishing and deploying our application now uh, for MVC6 and ASP.NET 5. So what exactly the roadmap and what are the what are the versions Microsoft has released so far? The Microsoft initially beta 6 is being released in 27 July the last year 2015, and beta 7, beta 8 right now as 7, and they released in November 2015. The RC1 is the major release from the Microsoft with respect to MVC 6 and ASP.NET 5. They renamed recently ASP.NET Core 1.0. So this November release is supported for production ready cross-platform. That means we can use this November release ASP.NET 5 for our production ready application. Means that we can make use for designing and developing applications for the production. In the future, they are planning to support in the next versions of ASP.NET. For support, they would like to support for Visual Basic, Signal R3, and Web Pages 4. And please note that these dates, whatever I shown in the previous slides, may change subject to the feature. They would like to add these changes as well. Right now, these I took from the ASP.NET website only. So these dates or features may vary depending on the next releases. The summary of ASP.NET. I am almost finished uh, giving complete information about ASP.NET 5 and MV6. Let's go through the things, the summary, like we can see in a nutshell what we have discussed so far. And MVC, like summary of ASP.NET 5, is it is a unified application framework for design and developing web and cloud-based web applications, which run for Windows. Apart from Windows, it also supporting for Linux and Mac OS. And we can host the regular Windows IAs. Apart from regular Windows IAs, we can host our own process or Kestrel as well. And it is a built-in support for .NET Core. So there is support for side-by-side execution, and it ships entirely on Nugget packages, and built-in support for dependency injection. And they unified all these MVC Web API and MVC UI like web pages, make it as a single ASP.NET MVC 6 framework. And it built and runs on cross-platform, as I told in the previous slides also. And I discussed how the MVC 6 and ASP.NET 5 runtime is supporting for open source and cross-platform. And it truly support for side-by-side deployment. And I recently, just now I explained about how it is supporting for unit testing framework and by using XUnit.NET framework. Finally, we can say like ASP.NET is more secure and more maintainable, work better with source controller, and has a better separation of concern than approach used in the previous versions of ASP.NET. Let's discuss what are the things we have discussed so far from the whole sessions, like video 1, video 2, video 3, video 4. We have discussed what exactly the Microsoft bold move with respect to why they have taken the bold move on the innovation open source level, cross platform level, and why this recent years is very buzz about Microsoft.NET technologies, and what are the challenges they took to support for they want to make this .NET to open source, and they want to support for this .NET MVC to cross-platform. And I have discussed about Microsoft .NET 2015. What exactly the .NET 2015? Why we call it the .NET 2015 is umbrella for recent releases. And I have also gone through that tiny and small frameworks like .NET Core framework, and also I have discussed about .NET Framework 4.6 and .NET Core and .NET Framework 4.6 architecture, advantages, and the .NET execution model. Suppose if you write the code, how internally the dynamic compilers Roslyn comes into picture, how it is compiling our .NET application. And I have discussed, I have gone through that web stack from Microsoft from 1996 to from ASP2 till MVC6. So what are the evolution happened in all these periods? And I also discussed about current challenges in the ASP.NET current world when we competing with the modern hardware, modern data formats. And I also discussed about ASP.NET 5, what exactly the ASP.NET 5 and MVC 6, ASP.NET 5 advantages, ASP.NET 5 architecture, and ASP.NET Core 1.0, why the Microsoft recently they renamed ASP.NET 5 and MVC 6 to ASP.NET Core 0. And I also discussed about client-side and server-side supported frameworks, and I also discussed about how the MVC6 ASP.NET 5 is fitting the new world of open source and cross-platform. And I finally discussed about what exactly the MVC5, the current challenges in current MVC. And I also discussed about how these resolve these current MVC5 challenges in MVC6 and MVC6 framework, MVC6 benefits, and project templates for MVC6 in Visual Studio 2015, project structures and new files and folders, and a client-side dependency management tool, server-side dependency management tool, and the current web server architecture, how the current IAS and ASP.NET runtime are coupled together, and how they made as a decouple these web server and ASP.NET runtime by introducing OWIN and Katana architecture. And I also discussed the built-in middle, what exactly the middleware, what are the built-in middleware like non-functionality, authentication, caching, and the functional frameworks like middleware frameworks like MVC6 and a web API, identity, signal or. And I also discussed about how to install that ASP.NET 5 runtime on Linux, Mac OS, Windows, and what are the main components required to design and develop any .NET web application, ASP.NET 5 web application, the DNX, DNVM, DNU, and what are the availability of development tools like Visual Studio Code, and command line tools, and unit testing. What are the supported unit testing frameworks like XUnit, .NET, and how we can publish our application into either Windows or non-supported Windows platform like Linux and Mac OS, and finally ended up with the roadmap and releases. Now, I have used these resources preparing these slides, these presentations. I used .NET 2015 from Microsoft, C# from Microsoft MSDN, and ASP.NET from ASP.NET website. And thank you very much, and really I appreciate and all the best for this for new career on MVC 6. And if you really like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You would get notified further latest updates from my channel. Yeah, thank you very much.